Welcome to Madison City Channel's Know Your Candidates interviews, co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Dane County. I'm your interviewer, Louise Robbins, and I would like to introduce Lindsay Lemmer, running for Alder from District 3. As we begin, please tell our viewers a bit about how your educational, vocational, and civic experience has prepared you for the position and why you decided to run for Alder.
Sure, and thank you so much to the League of Women Voters of Dane County for providing this opportunity. I was born and raised in Madison, and my partner and I live in the Heritage Heights neighborhood. In addition to currently serving on the Madison City Council, I've also seen the legislative process from the other side, and it advocated for important legislation as a president of the state chapter of the National Organization for Women, where I've worked on equity issues, feminist issues, LGBTQ equality, and racial justice. And I've also worked to increase access to the ballot box as the communications chair previously for the Dane County Voter ID Coalition, which is led by the NAACP and the League of Women Voters. On the City Council, I serve on the Board of Health for Madison and Dane County, the Plan Commission, the Equal Opportunities Commission, the Housing Strategy Committee, the City County Homeless Issues Committee, and the Public Market Development Committee. My professional background is in communications, and I have a Master of Business Administration, which I believe helps me to be a good steward of public dollars. Some of the items from this past term that I'm most proud of include sponsoring a pilot mobile crisis unit to respond to behavioral health emergencies that are not public safety issues. So reducing the calls that the police department is responding to. I also sponsored a pilot program with the Harambee Village doulas to address racial disparities in maternal and infant mortality rates, which could become a model for the state. And I also sponsored the Small Business Equity and Recovery Program to get direly needed aid to businesses struggling to cope with due to COVID. And as far as infrastructure and transportation, I worked to get an agreement passed between the city, the state, and the Ho-Chunk Nation to improve the dangerous intersection of highways AB and 1218.
Thank you. What issue or issues have you identified as being of primary concern to the residents of your district, and how would you approach tackling them?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I intend to focus on three key priorities based on what I've heard from my district: public safety and health, COVID recovery, and addressing Madison's racial inequities. I think that we have a lot of work to do in terms of providing more youth opportunities and engagement, and I think that is going to help us tackle our racial disparities and also help us with the public safety and public health issues that we've been talking about. So I want to work to have more youth programming, more supervised youth programming. Unfortunately, on my side of town, on the far east side, we don't have a community center. That's something, as far as long-term planning, that I would like to work to have. As far as addressing our racial inequities, we have disparities across every sector of our life. Madison is unfortunately a tale of two cities. We've got disparities in healthcare outcomes. We have disparities in criminal justice. We have a lot of work to do. I think the city needs to improve how consistently we're applying our ResJ framework, that's a racial equity and social justice initiative framework. I think some of the programs that I worked hard on and supported this past term are good examples of the kinds of things that we need to be doing. I'm proud that we have a violence prevention unit within Public Health Madison and Dane County that treats violence as a public health issue that it is. And I think initiatives of that vein are the kinds of things that we need to continue to do.
There will be an advisory referendum on the ballot in April about a number of modifications to the Common Council, including changing the number of members, making it full-time, and changing the term of office. Which of the ideas being advanced do you embrace? Why or why not?
Thank you for that question. The advisory referendum questions came from the recommendations of the Task Force on Government Restructure, which met 90 times over 2 years to look at how we can modernize our government and also make it more inclusive and more equitable to make sure that underrepresented communities have more of an opportunity to be able to participate and represent. As far as which questions I support, I do want to just acknowledge that based on state statute, these are things that the voters must decide on. These are not up to elected officials. I think having term limits is not a bad idea, but it is up to the voters. I think increasing the terms from 2 years to 4 years has some merit, because then folks can focus on being good representatives rather than having to work on campaigning so frequently. As far as whether to switch to a full-time council from a part-time council and reducing, increasing, or keeping the number of representatives the same, I think these are challenging questions, and I have concerns about talking about increasing how much we're spending on elected officials at this very difficult time when people are struggling to maintain a roof over their heads. They're struggling to pay their bills due to being in an economic downturn and everything that we're going through due to COVID-19. So I have concerns about the timing and whether this is appropriate to be doing right now. But at the same time, I recognize that it's something that we have to have addressed right now because it has to be part of redistricting if it's something that the city decides, if the voters decide they want to move forward with.
Thank you. Homelessness, evictions, and lack of affordable housing are vexing problems for Madison. This seems to have been exacerbated in the time of COVID-19. What ideas would you advance or support to help solve these problems?
Madison has a very serious housing crisis. We do not have the amount of housing development that we need to accommodate the amount of growth the city is experiencing. Having a vacancy rate in multifamily developments of 5% or higher is a healthy rate. We have not been up to that in a decade or so. So we have a lot of work to do, and it's something that I have certainly focused on in this past term. I think we need to look at more land banking opportunities so that we can have affordable housing in the areas where we need it the most. We need to continue to look at how we're appropriating our affordable housing fund. The Affordable Housing Fund prioritizes having affordable units where there is a good proximity to transit, to employment, to the basic amenities that folks need to get by. So that's something that I think that we need to continue to do and expand upon. And we also need to make it easier for smaller developers to be able to build in this city. And we need to have a process that is more predictable and navigable at the city so that we can get more affordable units and more of the missing middle types of units developed.
Thank you. With the selection of a new police chief and the creation of a community oversight board, there's a lot of attention focused on policing and criminal justice, both from the perspective of racial equity in law enforcement and the concern of many citizens that in fact crime, especially car thefts and home burglaries, is increasing and the police response is inadequate. How would you deal with these concerns?
Well, I certainly think that with what we've experienced this past year and the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others have made it impossible to deny or minimize the need for reform. I sponsored establishing the Civilian Oversight Board and the Independent Auditor Office. I also sponsored accepting the recommendations of the MPD Ad Hoc Committee, and I believe these things are going to go a long ways in establishing community trust and transparency in policing. I think, a few things that we need to do include the council needs to be kept informed on how we're doing with implementing those 177 recommendations. The police department, provides regular updates on that. So we need to continue to watch those very closely. And the new police chief and the Civilian Oversight Board, the Independent Auditor, and the Common Council all are going to have to work together and have open communication. I say all of that, but I also want to acknowledge that we are lucky to have a progressive police department, that we have great initiatives like mental health officers and community resource officers. And I mean, these have gone a long way in establishing more trust in our police department. And those are also things that were acknowledged by the MPD Ad Hoc Committee and by the OYR report.
Thank you. Madison businesses of all kinds have been severely stressed during the past year. What, if anything, would you propose to support business revitalization?
Mm-hmm. So businesses have been struggling so much through no fault of their own due to the results of this pandemic. I sponsored the Small Business Equity and Recovery Program, and I'm glad that the investment in that was greatly increased in the 2021 budget. But that is nowhere near sufficient. And in fact, we're already looking at that fund being close to exhausted for the year. I think that we need to do a few things that aren't included in there. Such as providing child care access. And that's something that the county received some funding to do, but it's also something that the city should look at supporting as well. Having child care access is going to be really critical for any kind of economic recovery, and making sure that child care facilities can stay open and provide a safe and healthy environment is going to be really important.
Okay. What would you like to say to the viewing audience as we complete this interview?
Thank you. I just want to once again thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity and for providing voters this way of learning more about their candidates so that they can make an informed decision when they cast their ballot. This is a truly unprecedented time, and the challenges that we face make me more committed than ever to working to ensure our city emerges from this a safer, more equitable, and more inclusive and thriving place to live, work, and raise a family. Our work reimagining public safety needs to take into account root causes and support solutions that aren't just reactive, but proactive. I'm proud of the work that we're doing in expanding the violence prevention unit within Public Health Madison and Dane County, and the vital work that they're doing through collaboration and partnership with the Focused Interruption Coalition, the Madison Police Department, and others. I'm proud that the city is finally, after years of community work to get us to this point, establishing a pilot mobile crisis unit to respond to calls that are behavioral health emergencies. And we have work to do in expanding the usage of our racial equity and social justice initiative framework. We need to take bold action to emerge from this pandemic as the inclusive and thriving city that we want it to be for everyone. And I'm committed to working to get us there. You can learn more about my campaign at lindsayforalder.com and on Facebook. And be sure to vote on April 6th or vote from home by requesting your absentee ballot at myvote.wi.gov.
I want to thank Lindsay Lemmer for speaking with us and the viewing audience for taking the time to know your candidates. As with every election, please vote. On behalf of Madison City Channel and the League of Women Voters of Dane County, I thank you for joining us.